Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, we've got our friend Scott Jones in the house. Scott has been a solopreneur for the last 5 years. His first business was a private math tutoring company that extended into a college prep service. From there, he was inspired to help others in a deeper way through coaching. He's now leveraging the power of LinkedIn and his famous LinkedIn cat, leash trained cat, I should say, Moose, to grow his practice, helping clients across the world. Specifically, what stands out to me, Scott, is you help clients turn mindset into money.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
We're excited to have you.
Glad to have you.
Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are now.
This is always a really fun question because I think if you ask this question to anyone who is a coach, you'll get a completely different answer from everyone because it's one of those things where you don't go into college or university thinking like, I'm going here to pop out a coach. Just no one does that. You're really,
Probably
it
not.
comes from your, right? It comes from your journey and it's more like you're called into it. And so my journey starts, of course, in college. I graduated with biomedical engineering from Georgia Tech. And outside of that, I also got a marketing minor. And so that's actually like my third year in college. I was like, engineering, I like it, but it's not really the route I want to take. So I actually my first job out of college was a marketing director. Was there for 6 months, wasn't a good fit, moved on to the next job, which was an HR manager. So here we are, engineer, HR manager. How does that work?
Mhm.
So but it was helpful, right? I got to improve my social skills, like talking with people and all of that stuff. But I was there for almost a year, helped streamline the department, and then some financial stuff happened, and she downsized her business, and my position was cut. So I made a mark, but after that, like year and a half in corporate was when I really like had a self-reflection moment. Like, is this really the route I want to take? Is this what I was like my purpose? Is like one of those just like life altering moments. Like, okay, it's now or never. Am I going to jump over into entrepreneurship? I had a lot of family support and like everything was kind of set up for me to be able to do that. And so that's what I did. I was like, okay, well, what can I do? And I was like, okay, well, engineering, I'm good at math tutoring, super low hanging fruit, easy to get into that sort of industry. So I made a post on Facebook just saying, hey, I have this degree. So I tried to leverage a little bit of credibility from where I went to school. And I was like, I'm offering math tutoring. Who is in need? And I got a couple people. And then from there, I actually did well at it. And I just grew the business from there. So that maybe this will inspire some people. It's like, that's how easy it can be to start a business sometimes. It's just like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to put myself out there. That's literally as simple as it was. And so that's what really started my entrepreneurial journey was math tutoring. And after doing that for 2 or 3 years, I probably should have noticed this sooner, but I was like, man, like I'm only like putting a band-aid on the thing for these kids. I'm just helping them do better at math, get the grade, and then move on. And I was like, there has to be something deeper here. And so that's when I started looking into, okay, how can I serve these kids in a deeper way? And I was like, okay, like their habits, their mindset. And that was like, those are pillars of a lot of coaching models, right? Habits and mindset. And so I ended up starting to dig into some coaching stuff. And then I started applying it to just like freely. I wasn't charging more. I was just like applying it in my sessions with these kids and seeing some cool changes, and parents were taking notice. And then I had a couple parents tell me like what you're doing, like adults need this too. And I was like, this is my way out.
Yeah.
So I can finally start to maybe work with adults. And it actually turns out I made an 8-week program for students around this idea of like helping them really prepare for college, not just like get the grade, but actually prepare for college. And a lot of the work there was like building emotional resilience, being able to control your thoughts better, and uh, basically just the things that they don't really teach you in school. And again, like parents were saying, like, this is great. Like you should like do this towards like adults. I market this towards adults because I'm sure there are people that will need this. Like someone even said, like, my manager needs this. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that course did pretty well, but I only did that for a year before I started looking at other ways to maybe do like one-on-one with people. And that's what led me to LinkedIn. And I've been doing this LinkedIn thing and learning the platform, which has completely changed since like I was in when I was in college. It was like a resume platform, and now it's like an actual like really like community, build the audience, give tons of value. It's like a lot less about the resume and more about networking and stuff like that. And so yeah, I've been on that journey for about 9 months, and just using that platform, building my audience, building my network, I've been able to kind of establish a little bit of authority around just the topic of like mindset and just helping people start a business, grow a business, overcome like some of just the roadblocks and challenges that get in the way in doing those things. And about 8 months in, I've got my first full paying client, and then it kind of cascaded from there. And I almost have a full practice now, about 10 months in. So it's been a crazy journey. But yeah, that's how I ended
Fantastic.
up in coaching. It's been amazing.
Congrats. That's an
Thank you.
awesome story. I love to hear the success. I'm a big proponent of LinkedIn as well. And
Mhm.
when I first crossed paths with you, you were positioned a little bit more as a relationship coach.
That's
And
correct. Yeah.
just over the last few months, I see that your LinkedIn headline and banner have changed. You've got I think what's a cat on the back of a moose. Can you talk a little bit more
that's
about that?
That is the logo. Yeah, and that's a more recent creation. I whipped it up in Canva, and the inspiration was about like 6 7 months in. Um, I started posting a couple pictures with my kitten. He's like 10 months old, so he's almost like a after a year. You can't really call him a kitten anymore. But I posted a few pictures, and those like got a lot of interest. They're like, "Oh, he's so cute!" Yada yada yada. And I started posting more and more of him because it was helping get impressions and engagement, and that's spinning my content out to more people. And yeah, that just led to me just deciding he's going to be part of my brand. He's going to be kind of like my brand ambassador, or like my mascot, if you will. And I was like, well, his name is Moose, and that the inspiration of that name was actually that was one of my nicknames in college, was Moose. Just random. There's no actual like meaning behind it. Like someone just started calling me Moose because there was a logo on my shirt that had a moose on it. And he also is like super lanky. He's like long legs, and he has like a mustache of orange on his upper lip, and so he like his nickname is like Moose Stash. Little play on words there.
Mhm.
So it was like cat on a moose. It's a bit absurd, but it gets your attention, right? So
That's marketing.
that's good. Yeah, that's kind of the story. And I have had a lot of great feedback, and people are like, it's brilliant. And like, but like, what's also the story behind that? So yeah, that's kind of where that came from. But you did draw a good point, is like, okay, I was positioned one way. Why the heck did I change? Because it was something you weren't really seeing on LinkedIn very often, like positioning myself as a relationship or marriage coach. And honestly, I tried it so hard for 6 months, just posting content around the topics, and it was getting attention and it was great, but I just wasn't getting any like leads. And I think the reason was probably, one, I was still learning how to be good at copywriting to attract that kind of attention. But another thing is like marriage and relationships, they're really private, they're very personal. No one's
Yeah.
going to post online like, oh yeah, I hate my wife, like I need help. No one's going to do that. And so I really didn't get many people interested. And I was like, okay, well, maybe there's a different way I can position myself to still get people in the door and have those conversations, maybe get clients. And then maybe as I'm working with them, they'll share, oh, this is actually impacting my marriage as well. And then there you go. I end up doing relationship coaching either way.
Mhm.
I love it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, Scott, what kind of mindsets have you seen hold people back?
There's a lot. There's a lot. So I write about this topic actually pretty extensively in my book. It's called Made for More. I'm sure maybe in the show notes people can see a
I
link
didn't
to
know you had a
that.
book.
But yes, I did. So you'll get to get a little piece in my response to this great question. I'll just be pulling a lot of this from my book. And so I've noticed there are, I'd say like 5 or 6 like broad unproductive mindsets that people experience, but I'll just stick with 3 because for sake of time, because I'd sit here and talk for an hour if I talked about all of them. And what I actually like, and the way I talk about this in my book, is I like to call them battles, because oftentimes these unproductive mindsets are like clashing with their productive opposites. So it's like this opposite one wants to like burst forth, but the one that's like holding you back is just like bogging it down. And so these three like battles in our mind, if you will, are the scarcity versus abundance mindset. A lot of people will probably recognize that one. The victim versus the victor mindset, and then the all-knowing imposter syndrome, very common. And then the opposite gratitude mindset is what I believe is like the opposite there. And of course, the honorable mention would be like the fixed versus growth mindset, but I'm not going to go into that one because that I'm sure is talked about extensively already. So this first unproductive mindset is the scarcity one. So I think it might be helpful to share some indicators for just the listeners. So it's like you can kind of self-assess, like, is that actually me? Because you hear it and you're like, nah, it doesn't sound like me. But then, okay, we'll see. Let's go through some of these signs, and I'll let the listeners determine for themselves. So some of these would be like a fear of losing money, or maybe a resistance to investing into yourself or your business, hating selling or promoting yourself, maybe your services or a product as well, having a desire to be wealthy, but then little to no action to support it. And you might believe that life is just riddled with a lot of disappointments, failures, and mistakes. There might be a fear or indecisiveness, which results in you not just doing anything at all, or you might be giving up easily. And then you might believe everything, everyone, or everything is out to get you. And then that leads you to have trust issues with a lot of things. And another common one would be like you just don't like your body, or how you look, and you kind of feel like you were just dealt bad cards with your genetics or something like that. And then the last one would be you just believe your health in general is out of your control. So all of those would be like signs of a scarcity mindset. So that's that. So the opposite. So let's talk about the abundance mindset a bit. So these are the characteristics of this one. Confidence in your financial security and ability to make money. That's a great one. Willingness to sell and promote yourself confidently without shame or any kind of insecurity. You think big and you are on the alert for opportunities to grow, expand, and improve. And then you're also taking action in spite of fear, which is really the definition of courage. And then also you believe your relationships are dynamic, so they constantly are growing and evolving as you grow and mature yourself. And then you also are assuming the best of people, like most people have good intentions. And so those are some signs of more of an abundance mindset. So you can kind of see how people will desire the positive, the abundance, the productive mindset, but then all of these other things, the fears, the doubts, and these other worries and concerns will really like oftentimes take greater precedence. So that's
You're-
the first battle.
That's so interesting because to your point, you see that in people, right? But I'm intrigued to see, like, to your point, how do you find out whether that's you or not, right? Because so many people have mindset that are lying to themselves, and really, how do you decide which side of that you're on?
It's pretty tough. I mean, it's one of those things where you can look at other people and be like, oh yeah, they have that. But then when you try and like reflect yourself, it's like, but is that really me? Is that really me? And I think, and I would love to get into this later, but there's actually a model. I call it the CTFAR model or CTFAR model, and I think it'll answer that question really specifically.
Awesome.
To help you kind of break down, okay, like how can I actually like figure this out for myself and know maybe which side of the coin I'm on. And so, yeah, I would love to get into that. But maybe it would make sense to go over a couple of these other mindsets and then we'll have the whole picture, if that's okay. Awesome.
Go for it.
So the next one is the victim versus the victor mindset. And I have a very low tolerance for victim mindset, in my opinion. It's very much like I'm just going to place everything, all the blame, no personal accountability or responsibility or ownership at all. Everything else is the problem. I have very low tolerance for that, just in my life, and my wife being a therapist as well. We see it everywhere, and it's hard. We have to like bite our tongue a lot when we see it. But basically, some of the other like signs of this victim mindset would be like a lingering sense of powerlessness or helplessness in your life. You might be constantly dwelling more on just the negative things in your life and often letting others know how miserable you are in hopes to get some sort of like pity or more attention. Even it's like kind of twisted in that way. You might be abusing yourself mentally, physically, or emotionally through their words, thoughts, or even actions. and you also struggle to let go and move beyond things in the past. And you may be constantly bringing up the past to justify things in your present, like present choices you're making or behaviors. And that kind of goes hand in hand with also just blaming others for everything and the no personal responsibility or ownership. So those are all pretty common signs of victim mentality. And what I've kind of come to terms with is like this opposite, which is a victor mentality. So what I mean by that is taking full responsibility of your thoughts, feelings, actions, beliefs, your attitude, your behaviors, and your outcomes. All of these things are within your control. And again, we'll probably get into more of that a bit later in the show. But like all of those things are within your control. So you can't start to just blame other people for all of those things that are coming from within yourself. That just doesn't make any sense. So you're also taking ownership of the mistakes and problems. Like you're owning them. There is great, like, I don't know, it's just great when you see a leader admit to like their team or to their spouse or to even to themselves, like, I effed up. I made a mistake and I'm sorry, or this is what I'm going to do differently. So you that's the sign of a victor mindset. And you also spend time in the resolution process rather than just flaunting these mistakes and failures. And then you also, like another sign of a victor mindset is you're constantly trying to build yourself up daily. Maybe you're using affirmations or mantras and also assembling these empowering beliefs instead of the limiting beliefs, which kind of form these other unproductive mindsets. So that's the battle of the victim versus victor that I like to
That's
paint.
excellent.
So, yeah. So briefly go over this last one, imposter syndrome versus this idea of gratitude mindset. So I think a lot of people are probably already pretty familiar with imposter syndrome. It's commonly talked about across many different platforms because obviously it's very, very common. It's just like feeling like a fraud or a phony. You don't feel maybe as competent or intelligent as other people who are maybe competing for the same job or in the same space, like your competitors, especially if you're like a solopreneur trying to do this on your own. It can be really debilitating, just like looking at every other people that are like 2 or 3 steps ahead of you. And you're like, how the heck can I compete with that? That's like the imposter syndrome starting to creep in, right? And another characteristic could be a sense that if people knew you better, they would find out that you're not special or valuable. Okay, that's just flat out not true. And then also another sign would be like excessive ruminating, like chronic stress, just anxiety that completely prevents you from taking action. And all of this, like thinking about your past performance, how you look, or what you've said, all of this sort of clumps into this idea of like, I'm just like doubting myself. And it's a form of self sabotage. It really is. Like you're just like questioning everything in life sometimes. And so, on the contrary of this, is this idea of gratitude mindset. So, if we think of this imposter syndrome as often rooted in thinking of the past or thinking of the future, it's rarely like present focused, and that's why I believe the gratitude mindset is a great counter to imposter syndrome. So this is like you appreciate what you have right now rather than getting worried, anxious, or upset about what you've done in the past. So you're really grounding yourself in the present, what's really, really true right now. You're also thankful for like the one body you've been given, because we're only given one, and you commit to treating it well. Another sign would be just shamelessness about expressing who you are. That's powerful. Like when you just put yourself out there, who you really are. Yeah, there's going to be naysayers. There's going to be people that, maybe will rub against, but like at least you're being you. And that's important. And then also with this gratitude is like self-confidence. Like self-confidence, if you can build that self-confidence, self-doubt just can't stand up to confidence. It just can't. So that's the last common battle that I see.
Scott, is it fair to say that imposter syndrome is healthy so long as it's momentary? Because I think that I don't care if you talk to the highest performing CEOs, highest performing salespeople, name any classification or job. We all have those moments as like, I can't believe someone asked me to do that.
Right.
But then if you approach it with gratitude, it's almost like, wow, that's really cool. Like I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of myself.
No, I 100% agree with you. So let's say you have this thought of, okay, I don't know if I'm prepared to do that. That would be a maybe a little bit of a sign of imposter syndrome creeping in, but I don't I think there's a difference between having that thought and actually entertaining it and accepting it as true. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, there's the chance that you can fall into imposter syndrome, and that leads to a cascade of perhaps not great results, like lack of progress, struggling, all of that. Or you can use that, like you said, like use that thought and transform it into a launch pad to be grateful and see it as an opportunity rather than, oh man, this is a challenge. Like I'll just use an example for me. Like this is my second podcast. I was like, how can I deliver value? I'm not even good at this yet. But that's
You've
actually
already
not
done it.
true. Right. That's,
Yeah.
that's just not true. And so I chose to say yes to this because I know actually I am capable, right? This is a great opportunity and I'm grateful for it. And so that's maybe an example of like, yeah, I felt maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome creeping in. Like, man, am I really ready for this? But I was like, hell yeah, I am.
Yeah. Well, I actually love the visual you create by calling them battles,
hmm
because I think it speaks to what Chris is saying and what you're saying as well is you, we're all going to go back and forth on those things, right? I mean, that's why they're constant battles.
Yep.
But we talked a lot about imposter syndrome here. And we certainly talked about having gratitude as well. But I don't know that anyone's quite positioned it as gratitude is the way to fight imposter syndrome.
Mm,
But I think that
yeah.
that's a that's a light bulb, at least for me, of
Mm,
how do you fight it in a way, and that thought process of being in the present and recognizing for what it is. Because we've talked about, like, with imposter syndrome, it can be a fuel to some extent,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
Because it does challenge you to get better, right? Like, so this is your second podcast. I guarantee you'll prep a lot more for this one than you will for the next 10, right? That's but that's a good thing, right? Like
Mhm.
that's natural, right? So a
Yeah,
little bit of it, that battles can make us stronger. It's
100%.
just they can't paralyze us.
Yep.
It's interesting because back, I think episode 2, Dustin, we did an episode, just you and I, about
Yeah.
imposter syndrome. It was phenomenal, but this is adding a couple of pieces to that puzzle. And then just coincidentally, I think our second to last episode was with a gentleman by the name of Kevin Monroe, who's a gratitude coach.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, now we didn't talk about imposter syndrome. We just talked really about what it is, how you apply it, and why it's so important in your life.
Yeah.
And you're adding a new dimension to that conversation that just really enlightens this whole subject. So very, very interesting. We
But
can talk about this. Go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say it really makes sense when you think about it though, because when you are in a posture of gratitude, thoughts like I'm not good enough, I'm not prepared, I'm not really prepared enough, I'm not as competent, or like you're in that comparison trap. Like thoughts like that, just they can't be there when you're rooted in the present and what's true, and you're really grateful for what you have. There's just no room for those thoughts. And that's
They
why
just
I do
bounce
believe
right
it's a
off.
counter. Yeah, exactly. And that's how you win that battle.
I love the whole idea of mindset. Dustin and I talk a lot about that. I want to
mm,
come back to that, but I do want to ask you about something that I know nothing about. In
hmm
your content online, in a lot of your coaching, you talk about this CTFAR model.
Yeah.
Could you talk
Yeah.
about what that acronym is, what it's
Yeah.
about, and how
Yeah.
you implement that?
Absolutely. So this is like a little bit of the secret sauce. So
All right,
this is
let's go.
this stuff is, oh man, it is transformed my life. And it's kind of one of those things where it's usually the simple things that make the big difference. And I think people will find this to be incredibly simple, but when you actually do it, it's like, whoa. So each problem we face in life can really be categorized into these five components, as you've said, and changing any of these will kind of all impact the other. So they're all interlinked, as we know, right? And so, just for sake of simplicity, I'll just refer to this as the model. So you have the circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, and results kind of happen almost like in that order. Of course, again, they're all interwoven. So the more clearly we understand each component, the more clearly we can also find and identify the problem or which element of the model what we're going through will fit into. And so the whole idea is our thoughts about our circumstances are what generate our feelings. And those drive our actions, which ultimately produce the results in our life.
Boom.
Okay. So
That
it's
makes
like
so much
that,
sense.
that's the cascade, right? And so I want to obviously unpack these so the listeners can kind of see how they all weave together. So our circumstances are the things that happen around you and are outside of our control, completely outside of our control. So our past can't really change it. We can change how we view it, but we can't change what has already happened. We can't change other people as much as we would like. And this is where it applies to relationships, right? As much as we want to change their opinion, we can't. We can influence it, but we can't change it. And then things like obviously like the weather, like again, yeah, okay, global warming. Have we? Okay, we're not going to get into that, but in a nutshell, if it's raining, you can't say stop raining.
Yeah.
And so when we forget that we cannot control our circumstances, that's when we start to spend time and energy trying to change the things around us, other people in our past, and we just can't do that. And when we really sit down and think about it, it just doesn't make any sense to even try. So our circumstances are just facts of life. And the facts are determined by the details that everyone in the court of law can agree upon. For example, I just got fired. That's a fact. You're no longer working there. There's indisputable, right? And another example is I missed a deadline. Okay, you missed it. That's in the past now. That's a fact. Can't argue with that. And so learning to identify the difference between your circumstances and the thoughts you have about your circumstances, that can be really, really liberating for some people because they can really easily get kind of mixed up. And so we often subconsciously assign meaning to our circumstances with our thoughts. And that meaning is often stemmed by our past experiences and just who we are as well. And these thoughts are just sentences that run through our brain constantly, and occasionally we are aware of them, but most of the time we're not. It's kind of just almost like subconscious. And so, just like to recap this picture we're painting right now, it's not the circumstance, but the way you think about it. It's not your feelings, but rather the thoughts that created the feelings. And it's not your behavior or action, but the thoughts and feelings that resulted in that action or behavior. So your thoughts are directly creating the results you experience in your life. If you can come to terms with that, holy moly, like it's going to be it's going to be really big for you. So identifying this difference between circumstances and thoughts is an important step in your ability to self-coach yourself. So like I really am a big proponent of like, yeah, if I'm your coach, I'm going to be helping you learn and apply this in your own life. But the whole idea here is that I want you to be able to do this on your own too, on the fly. When you encounter a challenge in your life, I'm not going to be there to hold your hand, right? And so you want to be able to instill the skill of self-coaching yourself in that moment. And you can bring that into your business, into your marriage, and just into your just everyday experience, right? So a couple just final thoughts about this. Like our circumstances are neutral. Okay. If they're a fact, that's just neither positive or negative. And it's really our thoughts about our circumstances that make them positive or negative, right? So your circumstances do not actually determine how we feel. It's our thoughts about our circumstances that determine how we feel. Okay. So the feelings, like what do I mean by feelings? Well, we usually know like that's like sad, angry, confident, stressed, focused, feeling guarded, spontaneous. These are all actually voluntary though. A lot of people think like, oh, my emotions just happen. That's actually not true. Like these are things that, again, they're coming from our thoughts, right? And we can actually change how we feel if we change our thoughts, because that's like deeper into the cascade, like early, like, yeah, I think we all get that.
Yeah.
And we often think our feelings though, like are stemming from our circumstances. So like, oh, my son didn't obey me, therefore he made me angry. No, it's the thoughts that actually like the realizing, oh, he didn't listen to me. That hurt my pride a little bit, or he disobeyed. Like it's the thoughts about that then made you angry. So that's just like one, maybe example. And another one would be like, you might find yourself saying like, I'm so miserable because it's so hot outside. Well, it's so hot outside is not a fact, right? The sun is out would be a fact. But someone who lives in the Sahara Desert and comes to Florida and say, oh, it's 80, 85, 90 degrees. It's like, wow, this is great. It's not hot out at all. So it's like, that's where, our perspective and how you think in turn just generates how you actually feel. And that's the circumstances are what they're just neutral.
Scott, I've
And
got to
so
ask.
go ahead. Please do.
I've got to ask a question. I Googled the framework for
Yeah.
CTFAR. It's the first time
Mhm.
I've seen it. I can't help but think that maybe this should be a circle and there should be an arrow from results to circumstances. And why I
Yeah.
say that is
Yeah.
because it, to me, and this makes so much sense, and I totally resonate with this, is that if you have great thoughts, if you are in control of your thoughts, in
Yeah.
control of your feelings, and your actions are positive and they're
Yep.
working toward your goals and objectives, the
Yep.
results will be so good that your circumstances are always
Mhm.
good to above average.
Yep.
I shouldn't say always because life happens, right?
Yeah.
Tragedy happens, unfortunately, but that circumstance can always almost consistently be really good. So you're like, my
Mhm.
circumstance is great because I'm good.
Oh, absolutely. And actually in my book I don't go over this model in this kind of format specifically. This is something I've actually picked up from my own coaching and the coaching that I've received as well. But it is a feedback loop. It is in my book I actually
Yeah.
have an arrow that points all the way back to the very beginning where
Yeah.
when you start to change these limiting beliefs to empowering beliefs and things start to really change in your life, you have better control over your thoughts, over your feelings, and thus your behavior and your attitude and all of these things are changing. And again, as a result, your results will be changing, they'll be becoming more positive. That does feed into your circumstances, and it also reinforces those empowering beliefs even further, solidifying like, wow, like if I believe in myself, like this is what's happening, I'm going to really believe in myself more. And it's a compounding effect. It's always a compounding effect.
I'm actually going to say that there's something missing in this formula, potentially. And this is just my opinion because I think as I've gotten older,
Hmm.
I've kind of worked through a lot of these things, and some of these things are in my book too, totally different format.
Hmm.
Um, I think that self care needs to be in there, and I'll tell you why. In my experience, I went through a pretty big health issue years ago, and that changed a lot of the way I think and the way I take care of myself. And I mean, I'm not running marathons, but I work out almost daily. I prioritize my sleep, so I get my 7.5, 8 hours almost regularly, and I also have eaten a lot better. I do other things that when you need to decompress, you need to get away. Like, for example, time with friends, you got to go do it. Whether it's
Yeah.
playing golf or playing tennis, getting a massage, getting a chiropractic adjustment. I try to do all of those things a couple times a week because if that's what makes you feel better physically and mentally, you can bring your best self back to your marriage. You can bring your best self back to your being a dad or showing up as a better leader in work.
Yeah.
Therefore, you can think more clearly. You'll have better feelings and your actions will be even better. Result, you get the point. But
Hmm.
do you feel like self-care is a part of this as well?
Yeah. And maybe the challenge here would be the action you're taking to care for yourself, going to the gym, eating a little bit better, cutting out things that aren't serving your body, going to the chiropractor or the doctor when you need an adjustment or you feel ill. Those are actions, right? So I would challenge you like, what is actually the thought that you have at the beginning of all of those? Because, like I said, actions just don't manifest out of the blue. Like, we might have like the fight or flight might feel like a spontaneous reaction. Like, if something scares you, you're going to jump. So, in that regard, yeah, there's a bit of a just a natural, like immediate response that is an action. But in most cases, that we can trace it back to a thought is like, okay, well, what would that thought be? And maybe you could tell me, like, when you have that desire to care for yourself, what is the thought underlying that? Like what compels you to take action there?
Hmm.
To me, it was a feeling. I felt like I
Okay.
wasn't taking care of myself. I was nervous that I could have more health issues in the future. Granted, cancer is something that you cannot control for the most part,
Mm.
and so because of that circumstance,
Mhm.
I chose to make sure health was a priority.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But it's everything. You have to think about it. You've got to feel good about it. You've got to take the action. And if you do, you'll have results, which change your
Absolutely.
circumstances. I love this, by the way.
Yeah, I think this is incredible. I think for the listeners to try to figure out where you are. I mean, Chris, to your point,
Mhm.
using even just your real life examples of like where is it on that scale. I
Yep.
mean, it's I would say in the last week, I've probably had 6 different conversations with people around mindset, right? And ways in which you can kind of uncover. And to me, this model, I think, allows people to uncover it, because is it really what is it really, right? Is it your
Mhm.
circumstances, your thoughts? Is it,
Yeah.
if you're feeling what is it? Because I literally had this conversation this morning with someone where we were trying to talk through and saying, is it mindset or is it behaviors?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
in reality, this ties the two together really well.
Mhm. It's all linked, man. It's all
Yeah.
linked. And what I actually do with my clients here is we go through it twice. The first time is like, okay, there's clearly, and the way we actually do it is usually work backwards, because what we see is often the results, right? We can maybe think about what actions and then the results that happen, and those are what we actually visibly see. But the thoughts and the feelings, those are within us. We can't see those necessarily, right? So we
Mhm.
often start and work backwards to figure out, okay, the circumstance is also usually pretty apparent. I'm not getting clients. That's a circumstance. That's a fact. I'm not getting clients is sometimes also the same result of the cascade, right? So sometimes the circumstance and the end result are very similar or the same thing. But we work backwards from that to find, okay, this is like that first, this is the limiting belief that all of this is sort of hinging on. And then when we do, we work together to establish, okay, what's the empowering belief that completely destroys this thing that's holding you back? And then we paint this idea of this future model. Maybe it's not happening right now. Maybe it happens occasionally, but we want it to be more consistent. We paint this picture of this future model of, okay, now this is the thought that's going to serve me so much better. It's going to send me into a powerful state where I'll be more productive, happier, healthier, whatever it might be. And then we say, okay, having that belief, how does that make you feel? Motivated, empowered, excited, confident, secure, whatever it might be, right? And then, okay, from those positions of these powerful emotions, positive ones, okay, where you like, what are you going to do? Like, what action are you going to take that you may be not taking now? And then, of course, that will produce ideally the results that you really desire.
Absolutely. It's tremendous.
So let's talk more about mindset. We had Dustin and I had an interesting conversation with a client on earlier this week, and it happened to be about mindset
Mhm.
and how they wanted to change the mindset of their younger employees. So I'm curious, as you work with people, there's got to be a difference in, because there's a difference in marketing to younger people and older people. What is this mindset shift like with the Gen Z, the Gen Y versus people in their 40s and 50s like us? When I say us, I mean me and
Yeah.
Dustin, because I don't know you.
That is a really interesting point. And if I think about all the people who I've been working with, at least in the beginning stages of my own practice, I haven't really worked with anyone in Gen Z. There have been millennials, and I think it's what is it, Gen X? I think I don't think
Yeah, that's what I
anyone's
think.
maybe
Yeah.
that
I
old.
think, yeah, Gen X
um,
would be us, 40, 41 plus.
right? Yeah, I think I might have like one person who is in that range, but most of my clients are like late 20s, mid 30s, so maybe considered millennials still. So
Yeah. Well,
I
let's
would,
take that age range.
yeah, I would imagine there is overlap with Gen Z from what I have learned about them, which is a lot of these individuals want greater agency over their life. That's like a common thread. It's like, okay, maybe they've done the corporate thing and they've realized I'm just tired of having a boss. I want to do my own thing. I'm tired of being told what to do, being micromanaged. And so I do find a lot of common themes around mindset of like, okay, how can I gain greater agency over my life? Again, we always steer that back to let's start with your thoughts. Let's start with your thoughts. Because again, these behaviors and these actions and the results, which might be starting your own business, will come directly from really getting your thoughts, captivating your thoughts and getting those in alignment. And of course, that's being interlinked with these empowering beliefs. And so, and I might be wrong again, I'm not an expert on Gen Z, but if I were to serve these younger kids, it would be really painting a picture of the opportunities that they have. You can be your own person. You don't actually have to go to college. That might spark some debate. But if you really like, if you have all the tools at your disposal to be an entrepreneur, then be a freaking entrepreneur. Don't drop 30K on a college degree when you can start making money immediately, as an entrepreneur. And like, just like presenting these opportunities to take charge of your life at a much younger age. Again, if I were to serve younger audience, that's what I would be really trying to instill in
Hmm.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, what if we have a lot of leaders listening to this podcast,
yeah.
and whether they're a coach, but a lot of people in the corporate, medium-sized business space who think, how can I take some of this and not necessarily at your level, but how do I start to instill some of this in our culture? Because Scott, as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, holy hell, if some of these leaders could just understand the model, I
Yeah.
think this could be really influential and really beneficial into growing and cultivating a better culture, which, by the way, I think everybody wants to do or should want to
Oh
do.
yeah. No, that's a wonderful question. And I love how you're tying it into company culture and applying it inside these businesses. Because again, like this model is really, again, it can apply to your personal life, your marriage, your business, even leadership. And I think that's what you're kind of touching on here is like, how can these existing leaders become an even better leader for their team or their organization, which of course directly contributes to establishing a stronger work culture. And I would say a lot of this hinges like implementing this model from my perspective as a coach, but even a leader who's not a coach can still implement this by asking questions, listening really, really well. And I think those two things, like listening and then asking questions to your colleagues and employees, like that's where this really can come into play because a lot of people don't take the time to like, hey man, like what do you really like? What's really going on? Like
Mhm.
what are you feeling right now? And then you can go further from there. It's like, okay, what thoughts creating that feeling? Again, you don't need to be a coach and know it all to extract a lot of really valuable information from people around you. And I mean, those are all the questions that I don't see a lot of leaders asking. And that's as simple as it can be because again, the circumstance is usually pretty self-evident. The results that are happening, maybe an employee is underperforming. That's a
Mhm.
result that's happening. So instead of like firing them or like docking them and so like negative things, like a good leader will approach them and like, hey man, like what's going on? That opens
Mhm.
up the can, right? And then you just be a really good listener, just such a good listener, listening for the feelings, the unspoken words, and trying to extract like what thought they have. Because then as the leader, you can hopefully offer them like the empowering, like empower them in that moment. Like, like, dude,
Mhm.
I understand. I'm sorry you're going through that, but dude, you are so capable. Like offer them some encouragement.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that. Scott, I've got one last question. I
Sure.
almost forgot. Your LinkedIn title says "Turning Mindset into Money." Now
Yeah.
that really attracted me, brought me in. It mentions that you bring solopreneurs spend up to 40% of their time on tasks that don't produce income.
Right.
I know I've been there in the past in my younger days. Would you mind unpacking that for us a bit?
Yeah. So when it comes to LinkedIn headline, I'm trying to basically distill in as few words possible what like what I'm offering people. And that is turning your mindset into money. So most people we understand at least at a base level how important our mindset is. So we are usually somewhat aware of the thoughts in our head that hold us back and the ones that push us forward. But I think a lot of people don't realize how that really impacts our income. Again, the income being the end result, oftentimes, right? So that's why we did the CTFAR model, is because that income, greater or lesser or like
Mm.
plateaued income, is a result of stemming back to this mindset. And so I think if people really realize this, they would probably take their mindset a bit more seriously. Because if you're not, you could literally be leaving money on the table that could be used to enhance your well being, do fun things, or reinvest into the growth of your business, your team, or whatever you would want to spend that extra money on. And the statistics about this time waste that a lot of these beginning solopreneurs or entrepreneurs um, is just really an indicator that, man, like something about the mindset might be missing. There's a little disconnect there. And
Mhm.
so, just as an example of some of these time wasters, especially for anyone who's considering starting their own business, this might be valuable for you. You will feel like, oh, I have to spend hours creating a website, like a full website prior to having any clients, or invest a few $1,000s to have someone develop it for you. If you have that money to drop and it's like pennies in the pocket, okay, sure, go ahead. But you don't need that. You really don't need that. That's a time waste early on. And then
Agreed.
another thing would be like creating a landing page with a lead magnet. Again, these are not unhelpful things. They're just at the beginning, those are not going to directly produce income, because have you built the authority? Have you done all the market research? Are you having those conversations? And within those conversations, you can actually even close clients right then and there before you have all of these bells and whistles. And so another thing is many will create a logo and try and figure out this complex thing we call a brand at the beginning too. That's, again, those things, like I didn't come up with my logo. I'm 10 months in and I just stumbled across this logo that I really, really like. I'm 10 months in and I've had numerous clients already, right? So it comes with time. These are not things you need to be dropping hours and hours of time on in the beginning. You really need to be focusing on having those conversations with people who you would consider ideal clients, gathering as much data as possible, what they think, how they speak. All of those things will be useful for your marketing, like how you will connect with these people. And then from there, get a few clients under your belt and then maybe consider some of those other things. So that's kind of, again, the whole idea of like mindset into money is that model that we went over today. Is we take that thought, and then as your results become more positive, then it will directly impact how much money you're making.
Well, I think that's interesting. We've talked about this in a different way, but this thought that I don't have enough time is one that so many people have. And whether you're a solopreneur or you're in sales or whatever you're doing, right? Like, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. And then, to your point, you have time. Just where are you spending it? And it's so that's a fascinating thing. When you talk about the waste, and in a lot of ways, just the misdirection of where people are spending time. As a solopreneur, you feel it because it's feast or famine.
Yep.
Right. And I just see so many people with so much potential that are having that same waste, but because they don't have the pressure of starting from scratch, they just continue the waste.
There's no urgency.
A lot of it goes back to priorities for me, Dustin. I mean, what are your priorities? What do you prioritize in your life?
For sure.
And just as an encouragement to anyone who may be considering this, I have a few clients that only can dedicate an hour to an hour and a half a day on their business. So they do have a full-time job, or at least some part-time work, a couple part-time work, and they're working on this as like a side gig to start. I would always encourage that. I'm not saying quit your job like I did. Like, I mean, I didn't quit, but I didn't have like a backup net. It did create a nice like fire under my butt to make sure I deliver on the results. So that can be helpful, but I would never suggest like, oh, don't quit your job to pursue this all in necessarily. Just dedicate 1 hour a day. That's actually all it can take to really make some massive strides. And then after, 3 to 6 months, okay, maybe if you're starting to make some income from this, you can start to consider to, maybe dedicate more time or whatever. But like, by no means should this take away from like your self-care, from your marriage or anything like that. I think there are ways you can balance it all together with the prioritization, the setting boundaries and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's awesome. This is a conversation I think we could have extended for multiple hours. This is fun because we're learning. And so we appreciate you coming on the show today. But before we let you go, Scott, can you tell the listeners where they can find you and what you have available?
Yeah, I still don't have a website. Surprise, surprise.
LinkedIn works.
I would say if you want to connect with me, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you can put a link to that in the show notes for anyone who wants to just click the link and find me. And please connect with me, send me a DM, share like, hey, I heard you on the podcast, and we could just start a conversation. Like that's what I love to do. I just love to meet interesting people. There's no expectations there. I'm not attached to, and that's kind of another big thing. It's like, I'm just disattached from what happens, and that just enables the conversations to be so rich. You can find me on LinkedIn, or I can give you my email if you want to shoot me an email.
Yeah, drop it.
It's just Scott A. Jones and then 555@gmail.com. I made that when I was in high school, and I haven't changed it since. So yeah, Scott A. Jones 555@gmail. That's, shoot me an email. Like, tell me what you're going through, who you are. I'd love to chat.
Is your book available on Amazon or anywhere else?
Yeah, it is. It's available in ebook and paperback on Amazon, and I think it sends to most countries. I have found like some countries people have had issues with it getting shipped there, but yeah, again, like you could send the link there as well. It can be found, and just for if you want to look it up now, it's called Made for More, an unapologetic approach to eradicate excuses, get unstuck, and build your legacy.
How in the
Excellent.
world is that not in your featured section on LinkedIn?
That's a great question. And it was something that it came to my attention when I realized, oh, shoot, the way I pivoted, this actually aligns really great with it now. So
Yeah.
it is going to be there. So if people want to find it, I will. That's like on my to-do list this week or weekend.
It only took
Excellent.
me 3 years to feature my book in my featured section on LinkedIn. So, but yeah,
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I'm not perfect either.
For
All
sure.
right, Scott. Well, thanks so much for joining us. That was fun. I just really, I love learning about that stuff. I think mindset is just so important. I don't care where you are in your journey or where you are in life. It is truly one of the keys to unlock a lot of happiness and a lot of joy in life. So thank you for that. To all of our listeners out there tuning in today, downloading, leaving reviews, we appreciate you so much. And we'll see you next time. Peace.
See ya.